Good morning, students. In my previous video, we completed the asexual type of reproduction, and in this video, we are going to start with the sexual type of reproduction. So first of all, what is sexual reproduction? So sexual reproduction is a process in which two sexes are involved, right? The male and the female. So what is a sexual reproduction? The two parents are involved. So in sexual reproduction, the two parents are involved, the male and the female, right? And they form gametes, the male gamete and the female gamete, right? So what are these? These are the gametes. They fuse together, means the fusion is going to take place. Fusion of the gametes. Next step is fusion of gametes. These two, the male gamete and the female gamete, will fuse and it will form the zygote. Now again, the zygote will undergo different processes of meiosis and mitosis, and a offspring is formed, right? So this is a sexual reproduction. Here the offsprings which are formed, they are totally different from the parents also. And suppose if two offsprings are formed, A and B, among themselves they are not going to have any similarity. So the two organisms which are formed, they are different from each other also, and they are different from the parent also. So this is a sexual reproduction. Parents, then the gametes are formed, the fusion of the gamete take place, then zygote is formed. Zygote, after meiosis and mitosis, give rise to offsprings, and these offsprings which are formed, they are different from the parents also, and they are different from each other also. Okay? Now, in my previous video, I told you something about lifespan. In lifespan, we discussed about certain phases, and those were like the birth, the juvenile phase, JP, the reproductive phase, the senescence, and the death. These were the four phases which we discussed in lifespan. So what sexual reproduction, this is the juvenile phase. The end of the juvenile phase marks the beginning of the reproductive phase, right? So the reproductive maturity is attained after the juvenile phase, right? And in plants, this reproductive maturity which is attained, that is called as vegetative reproduction. Now getting into some examples. For example, in plants, in higher plants, right, the sexual reproduction is going to take place when the pollen tube is formed, right? This pollen tube is carrying the male gamete, right? And the male gamete is transferred to the ovum of the female, that is in a flower. Like the pollen tube is formed, pollen tube is having the male gamete then is taken through that pollen tube, and that pollen tube reaches to the ovary where the ovum is present or the egg is present, and the male gamete is going to fuse there. So such kind of reproduction is going to take place in plants. So coming to suppose in animals, right? In animals, if I am taking the non-primates, in case of non-primates, and non-primates includes the sheep, right? The goat, dog, right? So all these non-primates, they shows a specific cyclic process, right? In their reproductive process, in their reproductive system, that in case of non-primates is called as oestrus cycle, right? And similarly, in case of primates, right, like the mammals, the humans, or apes, right, reptiles, these all, they show again a cyclic process in their reproductive cycle or reproductive system, and that is called as menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle, right? Now, this was in plants, higher plants, how the male gamete is fused with the female. In some animals, non-primates and primates. Now, there are also certain examples in plants only where if I'm talking about plants, then I just told you that term we use in case of plants is vegetative reproduction, right? In some the phase, the juvenile, the phase when the plants are attaining the maturity, it varies from one type of species or variety to the another type, right? For example, in few cases, like first in case of plants, first I am having an example of bamboo. Suppose bamboo, the bamboo tree, it flowers in 50 to once in 50 to 100 years, right? It only flowers once, and once the fruiting is done and the flowering is done, after fruiting and flowering, it dies, right? So this is an exceptional case of bamboo, right? Another case is of a very important, that is Strobilenthus kunthiana, and the common name of this flower is Neela Kuranji. Right? So Strobilenthus kunthiana, it flowers in 12 years, once in 12 years. Right? So whenever there is flowering of this flower, it was seen last in 2006. 2006, the flowering of Strobilenthus kunthiana was seen, and the states like the Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. The hills of these three states, the hills were totally covered into blue stretches, and it was very beautiful to see how the hills were converted into blue stretches, and it is a main attraction for the tourism also. But again, you can see that bamboo is flowering in 50 to 100 years only once. Then it is fruiting and flowering and then dying, right? On the other hand, we can see Strobilenthus kunthiana, that it is flowering once in 12 years, right? So there is a variation. We can see the variation, right? So this was the basic about how you can see the diversity or variation in plants when we are talking about higher plants, or when we are talking about animals, or with certain examples. Now, the sexual reproduction, there are three events in sexual reproduction. The whole sexual reproduction cycle can be divided into three events, right? So there are total three events in sexual reproduction, right? So the first event is pre-fertilization, right? Second one is fertilization. Third one is post-fertilization. Now the name itself is indicating that before fertilization, that step is known as pre-fertilization, when the fertilization is not going to take place. Fertilization, when the fertilization is occurring of the gametes, and post-fertilization, once the fertilization has taken place. Now, this pre-fertilization, I'll discuss one by one all these three in detail. So, in pre-fertilization, again it is divided into two steps, we can say. First is gametogenesis, and another is gamete transfer. Okay. So gametogenesis is the formation of gametes. The formation of the male and the female gametes is known as gametogenesis, right? And gamete transfer, when these gametes are transferred by a medium, so that they may fuse with each other and enter into the second step, that is fertilization. So now I am going to discuss in detail starting with the gametogenesis, right? So gametogenesis, as I told you, this is the process of formation of gametes, right? If this is a male parent, for example, parents male and female, right? The male is going to produce a male gamete, female is going to produce a female gamete. So the gametes are produced, right? The gametes are produced. So the process of formation of the male gamete, that is known as, this process in a whole is known as, what is this known as? This is known as this is known as gametogenesis, as I have written over here. But when we are talking about the formation of a male gamete, this is known as spermatogenesis. As the male gamete, sperm is formed, right? Now, if I am talking about the male gamete, female gamete, then this process here, the egg is formed, and this process is known as oogenesis, right? So the two different kinds of gametes are formed. So this the term for these two, either the male or the female, the common term is gametogenesis, and the process of formation of a male gamete is, the male gamete is spermatogenesis, and of the female gamete is oogenesis, right? Now, once the gametes are formed, the next step is to transfer the gametes, right? So the second step is to transfer the formed gametes. How the transfer is now going to take place? So the second step is gamete transfer. So the gamete transfer also, the transfer of gamete is again variable. It varies from one, like in plants or in lower plants or in algae, bryophyta, pteridophyta, it varies, right? So I am starting with, like in, suppose in algae, bryophyta and pteridophyta, right? In these, the gametes are formed, right? The male gamete, when I am talking about male gamete, it is motile, while and is small in size, right? And the female gamete, it is non-motile and little large in size. So if the female gamete is non-motile, that the female gamete is not able to move. So what the thing here is required is some medium through which the male gamete may travel and reach the female gamete, right? So the medium in this algae, bryophyta, water is the medium through which the male gametes are carried over to the female gametes. Similarly, again I have told you in higher classes also, in higher plants also, pollen tube is formed, right? So again, that was discussed in higher plants, the pollen tube is formed. Pollen tube carries the, suppose in higher plants, right? What is going to happen is stigma, style, and here is the ovary. So the pollen will fall over here, right? It will develop a small tube-like structure, right? The gamete is present in this pollen, right? This tube will go on developing. This tube will go on developing and it will go like this, and here is present the ovary, right? Now the this detailed process we will study in our next chapter. What is going to happen is, suppose this here is now the male gamete. The male gamete will finally come and it will fuse here with the egg, right? So such again the reproduction is again carried. Where is the reproduction going on? It is going on inside the plant body. In higher plants, the process of pollination is going to take place. In some cases, there are some exceptions also, like in some fungi. Exception is always there. So, exceptional cases are in some fungi and in some algae, there are both the male as well as the female gamete, both are motile. Okay? So, this is an exceptional case. Now, this was the gamete transfer. And before, in pre-fertilization again, the fertilization, where is it taking place? Right? We will discuss now the second part, that is the fertilization. So, we are over with the formation of gametes. We have discussed the gametes are formed. Now, second, the gametes are now transferred. Right? Now, the second process which comes into consideration is the fertilization. So, second process is fertilization. Now, where is fertilization taking place? Right? On this basis, fertilization can be divided into two types. Right? First one is the external fertilization. Right? And another one is the internal fertilization. As the name in itself is indicating that fertilization is occurring somewhere inside and somewhere outside, right? So, in case of external fertilization, fertilization is going on somewhere outside. For example, in example of a frog, what is happening in case of a frog? The male and female gametes are coming from the male frog and the female frog, right? For example, this is the male and this is the female gamete, right? The gametes are now in the medium, like in the water, right? Now the male gametes are mobile and they will come and fuse with the female gamete and they will form a tiny structure called as zygote. And this structure is covered by a thin gelatinous layer which helps in the production. Now, where is the fertilization taking place? The fertilization is not taking place inside the body of an organism, but the gametes are released outside in the medium and the zygote is formed in external medium. So, that is why it is called as external fertilization. Similarly, in internal fertilization, like in mammals, what is happening? The male gamete, right, is deposited. The male gamete is deposited in the female reproductive system, right? In the female reproductive system. The male gamete is deposited in the female reproductive system where the male and the female gamete will fuse with each other and the zygote is formed inside the body of the female. So, this is the main difference between internal and the external fertilization. So, now this was the fertilization. Now, what is happening during fertilization? As we understood that in fertilization there is the fusion of two gametes, right? Now, the gametes, they are coming from the external medium. The gametes may fuse in external medium, for example in frogs, and they may fuse inside the body of a female as in humans or in mammals. Right. Now, the third and the last type is the post-fertilization. Now, post-fertilization deals with after the formation of a zygote. The events which are included under the post-fertilization includes the development of the zygote, right? So, till fertilization, we are done with the formation of a zygote. So, in post-fertilization, once the zygote is formed, Now, zygote undergoes the process of meiosis as well as mitosis, and it will give rise to embryo, right? And this process of formation of embryo, this is known as embryogenesis. What is this called as? Embryogenesis. So the formation of embryo, when the zygote is formed, the zygote is diploid, 2n, and the zygote after meiosis and mitosis result in the formation of a embryo, and this comes under the post-fertilization event. Now again, if there is a little basic concept. There are two type of animals, right? One is the oviparous type, right? And another are the viviparous. Viviparous, right? Oviparous are those which produce eggs, right? And viviparous are those which give rise to or give birth to young ones, right? So oviparous which give rise to egg, and viviparous which give birth to young ones. Again, the reproduction here, how is taking place? That, for example, if I take an example of an insect, example of insect, right? After the zygote which is formed, it is, I told you, it is having a small covering outside so that it may be protected. Now the egg which is formed, in case of insect I am talking about, if I take an example of butterfly, the egg which is formed, the yolk is not self-sufficient to nourish the growing embryo, right? So in such cases, what is going to happen is the egg is going to break and it is going to undergo certain stages like larva and pupa, right? This happens in case of oviparous type of animals. And in viviparous, what is the thing? Like in humans, the content of yolk is self-sufficient. The amount they are getting, the nourishment is proper, and it is not, the embryo may grow till like a full young baby can be, the young ones can be produced, right? So I mean to say is that where the eggs are produced, the yolk is not self-sufficient in some cases, so they undergo different stages. While in viviparous, like in mammals, we give birth to just young ones, and the egg is self-sufficient. It is having huge nourishment is proper, protection is proper, so they directly give rise to babies. So these were the three events in the sexual reproduction, and I'm just compiling these three events in nutshell. So we started with the pre-fertilization. Pre-fertilization, again, this is the period where the male and the female gametes are formed. So these are the, again, gametes, right? Now what is going to happen is they are going to fuse, and they fuse. This is N and this is N. These are haploid. Now the zygote is formed, and the zygote is going to be 2N. So next process which is occurring is fusion of gametes. This is the fertilization, right? Now the zygote is formed after fusion. After fusion, what is going to happen is that this zygote is going to undergo so many changes, and it is going to develop embryo. And then after a few more cell differentiation and cell division, it will give rise to offspring, right? So this can be categorized. This is called as pre-fertilization, right? Where the fusion of gamete is taking place. This comes under fertilization, and this comes under the post-fertilization events, right? the formation of embryos. Again, it will undergo, that is meiosis and a process of mitosis again. So these were the three events. We can also say that the organisms, they show similarity in their morphology, in their anatomy, in their physiology. Differences. They show differences in morphology, anatomy and physiology. Fundamental, there are so many differences, but the sexual events, these are going to be similar. The fundamental sexual events, these are going to be similar in all kind of organisms, right? So this was all regarding the sexual reproduction, and next with this we are over with our first chapter, and in my next video we are going to start our second chapter in detail. Thank you, class.